Hi everyone, it's Laura and I hope you're all doing really well. Today I wanted to do a bit of a reading review and look back at who some of my most read authors are. Now this is quite an interesting exercise because it obviously is biased towards authors who've written a larger number of books. So the people that have come up on this list are authors that I have read. They're kind of old or more established authors, or people that I read from when I was quite young until now. So there's not a lot of recent new finds on there. But it is quite interesting to look at this in context with what I'm currently reading, I think, because this gives quite a good historical picture of my reading nature. And especially as pre-booktube, what I used to do is if I found an author I really liked, I'd make like a concerted effort every month or every couple of months whenever I went shopping to buy a new book of theirs. So some of these authors, I remember I really was like trying to read everything they've ever written. And then since joining booktube like properly and getting much more into new releases, that's kind of fallen by the wayside a bit. So what I did was go onto Goodreads and list all of my books that I've read by the author and count how many books per author I have read. And these are my top 10 most read authors. And some of them were not a surprise. Some of them I'd started counting myself and I thought, oh, I bet so-and-so is going to be on there. But some of these I'm surprised are as high up the list as they are. I'll start at the bottom and work my way up the top 10 list. So these next authors, I have all read 5 of their books. There's quite a few that I've read 5 actually. So the first one on this list is Sarah Moss, who is probably the most recent author that I have discovered on this list, and someone who I have actively been trying to read all of her work. The first book I read of hers was The Tidal Zone, which remains one of my all-time favourite books, and I went back to read some of her earlier works such as Night Waking, and then there were Bodies of Light and Signs for Lost Children. I really do think her books are getting better and better though. I think Tidal Zone is still my favourite, but also Ghost Wall, which she most recently published, I thought was brilliant, like a very, very short novella, but packed with so much meaning and different themes. It was really, really clever. And I have already downloaded a proof of her new book, Summer Water, which was sent out by Pam Macmillan, I think last week. And I don't know when this is out, I just got too excited. I saw the email, saw Sarah Moss, and just immediately downloaded the galley. So I am really looking forward to reading that soon. Number 2 on this list, also with 5 books read, is Jane Austen, who I did predict would be on this list actually, because I've just got one left of her main group of novels left to read, and that's Mansfield Park, and I've read all the others. I know she has other half-finished works and short stories. I think, is there something called Lady Susan? I know there's other bits of hers, but of the main 6, I guess there must be, novels, I've read 5 of them. I'm going to be really basic here. My favourite ones of hers are Pride and Prejudice, Emma, Sense and Sensibility. I wholeheartedly love those books. Northanger Abbey and Persuasion I thought were really nice. I like reading her writing, but I thought were a bit just not as good. I can't really explain why, but I do still want to read Mansfield Park, and then I feel like I'll really know her body of work. Number 3 is Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, who I absolutely love and have been reading her books for like a number of years, since I was late teens I think. So I'm not surprised she's on this list at all. I think my favourite ones of hers probably is Half of a Yellow Sun, because that's the book I started with and I have been meaning to reread it for a really long time now. So this has reminded me to do that. But I think aside from that, I really like her short story collection, The Thing Around Your Neck. I just really like all of the stories in that collection. They all tackle similar themes that she does in her other work, a lot about immigration, especially between like Africa and North America. And I think it's one of those rare short story collections where each of the stories is standalone, works well on its own, but they do link thematically, and it does feel like a really well thought through collection. So I very, very much recommend that. Number 4 was a bit of a surprise to me, and that's Virginia Woolf. And I have read a lot of her books, but I don't ever think of myself as a huge Virginia Woolf fan, so I'm surprised that she came up. But when I think about it, I think the only one of her books that I have left to read that I know of, again, I don't want to act like I'm some kind of Woolf specialist, but is The Years. I haven't read that, and I think I've obviously read 5 apparently. I've read 5 others of hers. My favourite is probably still A Room of One's Own, which isn't quite fiction, it's more essays and, well, it's an adapted speech. But actually now thinking about it, I really enjoyed The Waves. That was so poetic, and it was the kind of book where at first I thought, what is this? And I really couldn't get my head around the way it was written. It's quite difficult to follow in the beginning, but the more I got into it, the more I was so swept up in it and like really, really loved it by the end. Number 5 is Siri Hustvedt, who is someone who I read a long time ago. The first book of hers I read was What I Loved, and still love that book. Again, one that I've been meaning to reread. But she is an author who I do try and seek out and read more of her work because she's written quite a lot. The Blazing World, I particularly enjoy by her as well. And this does take some themes of The Blazing World by Margaret Cavendish, which I still haven't read. And I've also read Margaret the First by, is it Danielle Dutton, I think is the author, which is about Margaret Cavendish, and I still haven't actually read The Blazing World. And this is a bit of an aside, but that book is just phenomenal. I love the way it's all constructed, and her work is always so much about philosophy and art, and I've read some of her books of essays as well. She's just so clever. She's one of those people that it's just a joy to read what she's put together, because she's like, wow, well done, Siri. Lots of good thoughts there. Number 6 of my most read authors is Charles Dickens, and apparently I've read 5 of his books. And I actually really like Dickens, but I don't read him very often. But I suppose this probably spans quite a long period of time in my life because I've read a lot more of him when I was younger. And I know he's a bit of an acquired taste. Of the ones I've read, I've mostly really enjoyed them, and that's Great Expectations, David Copperfield, Christmas Carol, obviously, and A Tale of Two Cities. Absolutely love all 4 of those. And the most recent one I tried to read was The Old Curiosity Shop, which I put down halfway through because I thought that just dragged on and on and on, wasn't really going anywhere, and it felt like one of those books which was obviously serialised in a newspaper when it first came out, and it felt like it was being dragged on for the sake of being dragged on. And I think possibly you get a bit of elements of that in Dickens because of the way they were originally published, but I do really enjoy his writing, so I'd like to try some more of his work. Moving up the scale, at number 7 with 6 books to her name that I've read is Sarah Waters, and I actually think, if I'm not mistaken, that's all of her books that I've read. Let's see if I can try and remember. There's Affinity, Fingersmith, one of my favourite books ever, love it, Tipping the Velvet, The Little Stranger, The Night Watch, again, love The Night Watch. Oh, and the most recent one, that was called something, The Paying Guests, yes. So that's it. I don't think she's written any books that I haven't read yet. Well done, Lauren. Sarah Waters is just one of those people that I feel so safe in her hands, and I just love the way she writes. And every time I pick up one of her books, it's literally just like slipping back into a comfy pair of shoes or something like that, and it just reads so easily. You feel like you're being really taken care of, as I feel with one of the other authors, which is also on this list. And that is so comforting to go into a book sort of already knowing you're going to enjoy it. Like, even if you don't like the plot, for example, you just know that you like an author's style. Number 8 on this list, or actually probably number 3. I probably should have been doing this backwards, like starting with number 10 and then going up to number 1 of the most read. Anyway, number 8 or number 3, however you want to look at it, is Juliet Marillier, and I've read 6 of her books. And that's partly because of Jean, let's be honest, and partly because she writes series, and once I've started enjoying particularly the Blackthorn and Grimm series that she wrote, you just have to continue. A lot of her books are set in a magical reinterpretation of medieval Ireland. A lot of her stories are based around fairy tales or reimaginings of fairy tales. There's lots of people from the other world and curses and magic and sorceresses, and it is really, I mean, not the most brilliantly written books, but they are, I mean, I don't know if that's taking anything away from them, to be fair. Actually, I do think they're well written for what they are, and she makes it quite realistic in terms of the violence of that period, to be brutally honest. Like, it feels like there's a lot at stake because a lot of her characters are women alone completing some kind of magical task, and that's quite a dangerous position to be in this medieval-esque period. It feels like she really examines the idea of power, but particularly male power over women, in lots of different scenarios. But also it's just so wonderful and escapist and really, really easy to read. Then number 2 of my all-time most read authors is Ali Smith, with 8 books of hers that I've read. Definitely somebody who I have actively been trying to seek out their back catalogue, but equally with the seasonal quartet that she's been publishing, you know, she has a lot of work that's already been out, but also she's currently publishing work which I am loving. She is quite an acquired taste, I think. She is very playful with words and dabbles in a bit of abstraction, a little bit of magical realism. You never really know where her story is going to take you, but she does seem to be one of those authors that if you like her, you love her, or you just can't get on board with her at all, which, you know, I think is really fair. I am just firmly in the love camp. And number one, the author who I have read the most is Margaret Atwood, which I am not surprised at all. I knew she would be on this list. Maybe I'm surprised she's number one, but apparently I've read 9 of her books. And she is definitely another one that I feel like with Sarah Waters, that I am in such a safe pair of hands. All of her books are very, very different, and it's hard to kind of describe her style, I think, but something about the way she writes, it almost doesn't matter to me what she's writing about. I just love it, and I feel like she can take me on any journey that she wants. My particular favourites of hers are probably The Blind Assassin, absolutely love, Hagseed, because I do like The Tempest and I like Shakespeare, and I love what she does with that book. I did really like The Handmaid's Tale. The Testaments I thought was okay. I didn't think it lived up to the hype surrounding it, but I think if that hype hadn't been there, I would have quite enjoyed it. It's not a bad book at all, but it wasn't like the most amazing book ever in my humble opinion. And one of her books that I did really enjoy was her book of short stories, Stone Mattress, which was out about 4 or 5 years ago. But I really liked that, and I love her short stories. And the best thing is there are still so many books of hers that I haven't read yet. So I haven't read The Robber Bride or Edible Woman. I don't think I finished the Oryx and Crake series, actually. I think I read Oryx and Crake and The Year of the Flood, and I think it's Mad Adam. Is that the third one? I don't think I've read that. I should check on my Goodreads app, but I don't think I've read that one. So yeah, just more Atwood for me to enjoy in the future. I would love for you to tell me who your most read authors are. Go and have a look on your Goodreads app if you use Goodreads, and just have a look and see who comes up the most. Are you the kind of person, like I am, or used to be anyway, that where you find an author that you like, you then immediately seek out everything they've ever written? Or do you just read, you know, book by book rather than author by author? Interesting. I'd love to hear if the people on your list are people that you would expect, or if there are some surprises in there as well. And of course, let me know what your opinions are on these authors. Let's have a chat in the comments and see if we align on opinions. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye!